Welcome back to Into the Abyss channel. Today, we're not going to be talking about the usual supernatural, but something arguably even scarier. This is the topic of serial killers and the people that encountered them. The first video is Jordan talking about how she encountered a serial killer while working in the Texas prison system.
I spent a weekend with one of the most notorious killers in Texas. So in my early 20s, I spent a lot of time in South Texas in women's prisons units helping people find forgiveness and second chances at life. And on this one particular weekend, when we arrived, the correctional officers informed our team that there was a new inmate on the premises. She was only 17 years old and had been tried and convicted as an adult for a very violent crime. And because I was the youngest person on our prison team, they voted me to be the one to work with her because she was young, I was young, and she might relate to me and open up to me. Now, I had a rule for myself when I worked with these women to never look up their crimes. I didn't want it to affect my judgment about them or to affect my willingness to help them, so that was just a rule that I always kept. So the correctional officers, they walked me down this long corridor into a classroom where sitting at the table was Erin Caffey. Now, Erin Caffey is a tiny thing. Now, I'm a tiny person, and I dwarfed her. She's very small, very timid, very soft-spoken, rarely will look you in the eye. And my first thought whenever I lay eyes on her and I sit down across from her is, how can somebody this small and this timid possibly be convicted as an adult for a violent crime? What violence is she possibly capable of? Little did I know. We started talking and we kind of started to get to know each other a little bit, cracked a few jokes. I tried to get her to lighten up. And eventually she did start kind of opening up to me, and she started volunteering some details about her version of what had happened the night of her crime. And I have to admit, even though I had a rule to really try not to know what people had done, I was very curious because, again, here's this tiny little thing. She's 17 years old, looks scared to death, and she's in this facility. And well, her version of the events that took place the night of the crime led me to believe that she was a victim in all of it and that it was really out of her hands. She couldn't stop it, and she's haunted by it, regrets it every day of her life, and she just wishes she could take it all back. And y'all, she was so convincing, just absolutely convincing, that I truly believed that she was innocent. She had somehow gotten mixed up with the wrong crowd, was wrongly convicted. And I started brainstorming in my head, like, how can I raise awareness about this and help her get out? Little did I know, in my naivety, that this young lady was a psychopath. She was very cunning, very manipulative, and the small, mousy, timid, soft-spoken thing was very much a calculated tactic to be a wolf in sheep's clothing. And my time with her started a long season of my life of panic attacks and nightmares, and I'm going to tell you more about that in part 2. I spent a weekend with one of the most notorious killers in Texas, part 2. Trigger warning, this video does include descriptions of graphic violence. So after I'd spent about an hour alone with Erin Caffey, listening to her tell her version of the night of the crime, I had become genuinely convinced that she was innocent and had been wrongfully convicted. I was almost even outraged that she was there. I was like, what idiots put this poor, tiny little thing behind bars with all these adult criminals? But y'all, in a split second, the entire energy of the room changed. Erin was sitting across the table from me. Her shoulders were slumped forward and her head was down, and she was just kind of talking to me like this. And then all of a sudden, I'm leaning in, trying to hear her, and she does this. She locks eyes with me, and my stomach drops. Now, I told you in part 1 that she was a sheep in wolf's clothing. Well, I'll tell you, in that second, the wolf showed up in her eyes. The hairs on the back of my neck stood straight up, and I had this horrible, just sick feeling that, like, I'm in a predatory environment now. I finished the session with her, trying to keep my cool, even though at this point my body is just crawling with the creeps, And I finished the session. I leave the prison, get in my car, and I go to my hotel room for the night. And I just sit in that hotel bed just processing, what did I see? And I told you I still had that rule for myself that I don't look up the crimes of people I work with. And I didn't. I rolled over, watched a little TV, and I fell asleep. But I didn't stay asleep long, y'all. I was woken up by this horrific panic attack. I'd had a nightmare about her eyes, those eyes, those dark, black, shark eyes looking at me. I had a dream about her face contorting and just evil surrounding me and being in the room with me. So I broke my rule. I looked her up, and it turns out that Erin Caffey organized, masterminded, and participated in the slaughter of her family. Her 2 elementary school-aged brothers were murdered with swords. Her mother, Penny, was shot multiple times and was nearly beheaded with the same sword. Her father, Terry, was shot multiple times, including several rounds to the face, but he actually survived the attack. Erin and her 3 accomplices lit the house on fire and fled the scene, and they were found and arrested the next day. And as for how it personally affected me, I truly believe that something dark and evil followed me home from the prison that night, and it stayed with me for years after that. I was haunted by night terrors, by nightmares, panic attacks, sleep paralysis, shadow figures. Not everybody can say that they have genuinely looked into the face of evil and had it look back into you, but I did, and it has never left me. So my video about spending a weekend with one of the most notorious killers in Texas is going viral currently. And so I wanted to answer this comment that says they wanted to know how I overcame it. And I'm sure what you're referring to is the nightmares, the sleep paralysis, and what I believe was a demonic attachment after the fact. I went through several what I would call spiritual cleansings. I had some friends who were gifted in this area. I went to see them, explained what happened, and we went through several processes of spiritual cleansing that did seem to help some, but man, I mean, still to this day, I struggle with panic attacks, and it all started back then, and I've never truly been able to close that part of whatever it is that opened up, that anxiety, that being prone to panic attacks. I'm 10 years after the fact, and I still have them. So there's a part of that that's never gone away, but I have learned how to cope with the panic attacks. I can shut them down a lot quicker now. I do take medication for them now. And still to this day, I still wake up at night with that feeling that something's in the room with me. It's just one of those things. I don't think it'll ever go away, but weirdly, I've kind of just learned to deal with it, and I've learned that even though I may have that feeling and I may have that fear, nothing's probably going to touch me or hurt me. It's just I happen to have a hyper awareness because of what I experienced in that prison.
Up next, we have the story of the infamous Israel Keys as told by Mshelly.
If you've never heard the name Israel Keys before, grab a snack, grab a drink. We are in for a crazy story today. This case takes place in 2011-2012, so not that long ago. And how would I describe Israel Keys? He kind of reminds me of Ted Bundy in the most horrendous way possible. That being said, if you don't like gruesome details, have a weak stomach, or just don't like talking about violent crimes, don't watch this. Quick recap on his childhood. He was one of 10 kids. He was raised a Mormon, and they lived off the grid, so in a house with no electricity, no water. And from a very young age, Israel would get in trouble with the law, and he had the one warning sign that if you are into true crime, you know is alarming. From a young age, he started hunting animals and hurting them and killing them, and that's like the number one thing, if you know crime, is a serial killer in the making. The thing that stands out to me about Israel, he has 2 things. He has rules that he sets for himself to not get caught, and he has kill kits that he planted all over the United States to prepare whatever he was in, wherever location, to just be ready to commit murder. So that's what he's known for. There is a documentary on him, and he's called the Kill Kit Murderer. So his family ended up moving to Maine, and they joined a Amish community. Then Israel decided he wanted to change his beliefs. He told his parents, they didn't like that, and he moved away. So that was the kind of him cutting ties with his whole family. He got involved in Satanism. He became obsessed with it, and when he was around 19 and 20 years old, he started fantasizing about committing his own ritual sacrifices. He had a girlfriend. He went into the army for 3 years and was discharged in 2001 when he was 23 years old. Then he moved to Washington, got a new girlfriend, had a baby, and put on this facade of a normal life. He started a construction business, and to the public, he was just a normal guy living a normal life, but he wasn't. The interesting thing about this case as well is that he did get caught, and most of the information that we have is coming from him. So like Ted Bundy, there are some tapes of him speaking about and confessing what he did. So we'll talk about his rules that he had set for himself. These were rules to go undetected, which did work for 15 years. He was out and about committing these heinous crimes, and he wasn't caught until he broke one of his rules and made a mistake. But his rules was to have no pattern in any of his crimes so that he wouldn't get caught. No specific location, so he would travel around the world. And when I mean travel, I mean take a plane, take a bus, rent a car, do everything that he could not to get caught. And he had no specific type of victim. So his only rule was to not go after children, but everything and everyone else to him was fair game. And then his kits. So he had kit kills that he would plant around. I know he planted 12 in different states, and they were essentially buckets or bags filled with weapons that he wanted to use, filled with cleanup supplies, drain cleaner for fingerprints. I guess that's how he would get rid of his victims' fingerprints, and then disguises, so like hoodies, sunglasses, gloves, and things like that. So like I said, he was committing a lot of crimes. This included robbing banks, and he was getting too confident and thought that he would never be caught until he made the mistake, and did. So a lot of victims before the one that I'm going to be speaking about today, the girl I will be talking about, her name is Samantha Koenig. This one stood out to me specifically, which is why I'm going to go more into detail on it, and you will hear why. So this was on February 1st, 2012. Israel broke one of his rules and decided that he would try to commit murder in his hometown in Alaska. So by this point, he's in Alaska, he's working, he has his girlfriend and his daughter living with him. And there is a coffee kiosk that he notices. He's been watching it, notices that it's always a girl at the closing shift and she's always alone. So he decides that he's going to go after her. So he drives over there to the coffee kiosk one night. He sees the girl there and waits until everyone else leaves. Then he goes up to the little window, orders something. As Samantha turns around to give him his coffee, he gets up on the little window of the kiosk and points a gun at her, orders her to turn off all the lights, and starts taking the cash out of the register. There's not much money in the register. He's used to robbing banks, so he tells Samantha to give him everything that she has. She tells him she doesn't have much, that her wallet is actually in her boyfriend's truck that's parked in his driveway at a different location. So then he ends up taking her wrists, tying them with zip ties, and puts her in his truck. While they're driving, Samantha actually does manage to break out of the zip ties. She gets out of the car and starts running, but Israel unfortunately catches her and puts her back in the car. And for some reason, Israel's past of committing crimes have always been very organized, and like I said, his number one goal is to go undetected always, and it has been until this one time. So for some reason, he takes her phone while they're in the car and texts her dad, her boyfriend, and her boss, pretending to be Samantha, and says, "I'm having a really hard time, I'm gonna go away for a little bit, don't look for me." Of course, the dad and the boyfriend and the boss are like, "This is not Samantha." They report her missing. Meanwhile, Israel is driving her back to his house, which he don't know why. Once they're back to his house, he walks in to make sure that his girlfriend and his daughter are still sleeping, which they are. So then he takes Samantha, shoves her into a shed in either his back or front yard. While Samantha's in a shed, he actually drives to the boyfriend's house, breaks into his car, takes Samantha's wallet, and the weird thing is that Samantha's boyfriend actually saw this happening. He was looking out the window and he saw Israel breaking into his truck. Obviously, he didn't know that's the guy that had taken his girlfriend, so for some weird reason, he did not report it to the police. By this point, Samantha has been missing for 3 weeks. There are no new news until the boyfriend gets a text from someone from Samantha's phone and says to go to this location and look under a sign of a dog, a missing dog. Under the sign, they find a little baggie that has a ransom note and a picture of Samantha. Remember the picture. The ransom note is a typed note, and it says that they need to put $30,000 into Samantha's bank account because Israel has her wallet and he would be able to use the money from her card. And then it has the picture of Samantha. So I'm going to give you a little insight that nobody finds out this until the end, but in the picture that was taken, Samantha was actually already deceased, except for she looked alive, and this is your warning. Everyone involved in the investigation of Samantha does not find this out until the end when they catch Israel and he confesses, but essentially what happened was the night that he took her was the night that he ended her life. He ended her life, and then once she had already passed, he brushed her hair, put it in a braid, put makeup on, what I imagine was his girlfriend's makeup, which is disgusting, and then because she was deceased, she couldn't keep her eyes open. So he sewed her eyes open with fishing line. Once he had sewed her eyes open, he sat her up, gave her a newspaper with the current date on it, and then is when he took that picture so that it looked like she was alive, and that's the picture that he put in the ransom note as proof of life, even though she was already deceased. So once they saw the note, the ransom note, that he wanted $30,000, the parents just put into Samantha's account $5,000 just to kind of hold off to keep her alive until they decided what the next step would be. And Israel started traveling around, going to different ATMs in different states. And what he didn't realize was he was trying to throw off the police by going to different states and not letting them guess his next move. But what he didn't think about, for some reason, are the security cameras by the ATMs. So when he was doing that, he was wearing a disguise. However, in the back of the security cameras on multiple ATMs, you could see his vehicle. So the cops knew now what kind of vehicle they were looking for. The car was a white Ford Focus, and they tracked her location by the alerts from the card in the ATMs. He had been in New Mexico, Arizona, and Texas, so they put out alerts to all the cops, letting them know to look for a white Ford Focus with a male. On March 14th, some cops saw the white Ford Focus driving around. They pulled him over because he was speeding a little bit, searched his car. They saw all the things that were in the murder kits, and then they also found Samantha's license, so they knew they caught the guy. He was interrogated once he was arrested and back at the station, but he was just awful. Like, he would try and ask for things in exchange before giving information. So like, he would ask for a coffee before telling them, or a cigar, blah, 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 and kind of was playing games with the cops. But then he confessed, and he said that Samantha was dead. And the cops were confused because they're like, wait, she was alive in the picture. Israel was awful. He was trying to bargain with the officers, and he wanted to confess under his conditions. Condition number 1 was being able to keep his name hidden. Condition number 2 is granted the death penalty, but the cops were like, we're not going to give you the death penalty if you're going to take all these secrets to the grave. Once he realized the cops were not going to keep up their end of the deal and they weren't following his instructions to keep his name hidden, he decided to end his own life in prison. And before he died, in his own blood, he wrote or drew pictures of 11 skulls. So we think that he had 11 victims, but we'll never know now, which sucks because those families won't ever get closure. But yeah, another crazy one for you guys.
For our next story, we have Cait telling us about her encounter with the lesser-known serial killer Otto Daniel Wood.
Get ready with me while I talk about the time I met the serial killer Otto Daniel Wood. So if you didn't know, Otto's in a band called Water Parks, and I started being a casual listener around like this time last year, and whenever they announced a tour, I was like, okay, I'll go. I happen to be from the same place that they're from, so I got tickets to their hometown show, and I had no idea what I was in for. By the time the tour had rolled around, I became a pretty big fan, so I bought VIP, which means I got to meet the entire band, including the drummer, Otto. So I get in the VIP line, and eventually it's my turn to meet them, and everything was going fine, like all was well, and then I got to Otto, and things just got a little uncomfortable. He was honestly just being super sketchy, you know, kind of giving weird looks, just like weird vibes in general, and I was just like kind of uncomfortable. And at this time, I had no idea of like the accusations that were against him, so I was just a little confused. So I kind of just brushed off that whole interaction. We watched the show, everything was fine, it was a really good show, and then as we were walking out of the venue, there was these people handing out pins that said Free Otto. Here it is, and again, at this point I had no idea what he had done, so I was just really confused by the whole situation. So again, I was just kind of sketched out by the whole situation, so I went home and I did some research, and I look online to find out that he had killed like several people, and I was just like, so obviously scared and stunned that I had literally just met a serial killer, I look on Twitter to see if anything happened at the Houston show that I was at, and it turns out there had been people who had seen him in an alley behind the venue with a girl who later went missing. So now that everything's coming out, I really just wanted to share my story and say that I'm really glad that he's finally getting exposed for all the things that he's done, and I can't imagine ever supporting that band ever again.
For this next video, Kirsten will be telling us about the time her mom encountered the infamous Ted Bundy.
My mom survived a serial killer, and this is her story. Okay, so my mom was attending college, and she was walking out of the library when a very handsome man with a beard approached her. It was raining really hard, and he complimented her cute polka-dotted umbrella. Anyways, they strike up a conversation, and he mentions that because he's a photography student, he notices things like cute umbrellas. He's got an eye for it. But the university my mom is going to, they had a dress code, and beards were not allowed for students to have at that time. And so she had a little red flag like, if he's a student here, how does he have a beard? So the conversation's winding down, and he offers to hold her umbrella and walk her to her car because her hands are full of books. She says that she really didn't want him to walk her, like she just had this weird feeling, but felt awkward saying no, so she said yes. As she starts approaching her car, she said that her stomach started getting the butterflies, and it's like she just knew not to go to her car. And I think it's worth mentioning, pausing the story right here, because I work for a nutrition company, and I learned that your gut has 500 million neurons, and your brain has 1 billion, or 100 billion, I don't remember. Okay, I just looked it up. 100 billion neurons are in your brain, 500 million are in your gut. And that's why they call your gut your second brain, because they are totally connected. So if you have a gut feeling, you have to listen to it. So they're walking in the parking lot, and he's asking, okay, so which car is yours? Which direction do we walk? And my mom just can't take that feeling in her stomach anymore. She goes, oh shoot, you know what? I just remembered I have to meet up with a friend. No need to walk me to my car anymore. I actually have to go back to the building. She then says that he acted a little bit annoyed, but he smiled and asked if he could call her later. That because it's close to finals week, he had one final project where he needed to photograph somebody and thought that she would be perfect and that he would love to connect with her. Now, my cutie mama is the biggest people pleaser you will ever meet in your entire life. Maybe that's where I get it from. And she couldn't say no. But instead, she decided to come up with like a loop around where I just moved into my new apartment, so I don't remember the new phone number, but if you can look up my parents in the phone book, you can call them and then we can connect. Now, my grandma and grandpa have very unoriginal names. There's at least 10 people with the same names in the phone book. So she figured, one, he's probably not going to spend the time looking in the phone book, and two, he's not going to figure out like which number is theirs. So my mom scurries off and thinks that she's avoided some weirdo, but didn't really think much of it until later that night.
Our next video is a short but chilling story of Cindy's encounter with Ted Bundy.
Okay, first story about my possible run-in with Ted Bundy. When I was 18, 19 years old, I was dating someone who had an aunt that lived in Issaquah, and we were going to go out and visit Aunt Sue. She lived right below Tiger Mountain, and Tiger Mountain's where Ted Bundy was burying a lot of the bodies. Right next door to Aunt Sue lived a man who had two friends that were rooming with him, and they used to all go hunting together on Tiger Mountain. One of those friends was named Ted, and when we were going to go over to visit Aunt Sue, Ted wanted to come over and say hi. It was Ted Bundy. Luckily, I was with a lot of people. We didn't go over to his house. We didn't certainly go up to Tiger Mountain with him, but he lived right next door to Aunt Sue. Scary.
Up next, we have Ray talking about one of the most infamous American serial killers, Robert Ben Rhodes.
This man is one of the worst serial killers in U.S. history, and a lot of people don't know about him. He's the monster behind this photo, which is widely considered to be one of the most disturbing photos in existence. And I'll talk more about this later. This is the story of Robert Ben Rhodes, also known as the Truck Stop Killer. Reminder that I tell a lot of dark, true crime stories on this channel, so viewer discretion is advised, but follow along if you want to hear more. So Robert Rhodes' early life was relatively normal. He was in football and wrestling and choir, and when he graduated high school, he joined the Marine Corps. Then something happened that devastated him. See, Robert Rhodes' father was also a Marine. Right after he joined the Marines, his father was dishonorably discharged for inappropriate contact with an underage girl. And while awaiting trial, his father took his own life. And that seemed to cast a very dark, sinister shadow over the decisions that Robert Rhodes made for the rest of his life. So Robert Rhodes was called the Truck Stop Killer, and this is why. So he was discharged from the Marines because he was involved in a robbery, and he worked a bunch of odd jobs until he eventually settled on becoming a long-haul truck driver. He'd make a lot of long cross-country trips and was known to pick up hitchhikers, but specifically targeted runaways. especially if they were teenage girls. His first known victims were a couple on their honeymoon. The couple was 28-year-old Douglas Siskowski and his wife Patricia Walsh, who was 24. He picked them up as hitchhikers. They were a young Christian couple just trying to hitch a ride back to their hometown. Robert Rhodes promptly shot and killed the husband and disposed of his body on the side of the highway, but he kept Patricia alive for a week before he took her life. And that week must have been agonizing for her, because he really relished in torturing women. He kept her captive in his truck and forced himself upon her. Then when he had decided he had had his fill, he would dump the bodies on the side of the road. And he continued to do this for years. Here's another detail that's pretty important to this story that you should know. While all this is happening, Robert Rhodes has been married 3 times, he's fathered 2 children, and he's very into BDSM. Like, he is obsessed with doing it. And that was a big part of his compulsion to do the terrible things that he did. This photo is actually a cropped image of him in a full BDSM outfit. Not sure if I could post it here, but it is on Google. All 3 of his wives say he was violent in the bedroom and seemed to gain pleasure from their discomfort or pain. So let's talk about this picture, because it has one of the most chilling backstories ever. This is Regina K. Walters. She's 14 years old, and just a couple weeks before this photo was taken, she looked like this. Regina and her 18-year-old boyfriend were hitchhiking when they were picked up by Robert Ben Rhodes. But almost immediately after he picked them up, he took her boyfriend's life and dumped him on the side of the road. But he kept Regina alive for 2 weeks and subjected her to unimaginable psychological and physical torment. Unfortunately, Regina didn't stand much of a chance, because Robert Ben Rhodes had been at this for years and knew exactly what to do without getting caught. He knew to target runaways so not many people would look for them. He was always on the run because he was always driving cross-country. And worst of all, he had converted the sleeper cabin in his truck into like a torture chamber. It was equipped with chains, shackles, handcuffs, knives, and it was all to enact his very non-consensual, sadistic BDSM fantasies. Regina K. Walters was on the receiving end of all of this. He also forced her to wear these clothes and shaved her hair. Authorities believe this photo was taken shortly before Regina K. Walters passed away, which show a very terrified kid. Her body was found badly decomposed in an abandoned barn in Illinois. Robert Rhodes was eventually caught, and this is how. In 1990, a police officer saw a truck pulled on the side of the road in Arizona with its hazard lights on. When the officer looked inside the cab of the truck, he was shocked when he saw a woman. She was handcuffed, screaming, and wearing nothing but her birthday suit. Robert Rhodes tried to talk his way out of it. Luckily, the police officer had more than 3 brain cells and was not buying it, and promptly arrested him. Authorities searched his house while they were investigating him. They found a number of disturbing items, like makeup, women's clothes, and torture devices, and a number of pictures of his victims, including the photos of Regina K. Walters. Robert Ben Rhodes confessed to taking the 3 lives of the people I mentioned in this story. But he was a truck driver for 15 years, and he admitted to committing crime the entire time. But authorities believe he's tied to about 50 unsolved deaths across the United States. Robert Rhodes was convicted of first-degree murder in 1994. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He's serving his sentence in a prison in Illinois, where he remains to this day.
For our last clip, we have a chilling close encounter with the alleged Gilgo Beach killer Rex Heuermann.
Okay, if you've looked at the news, if you've been on TikTok, if you're a true crime fan, you'll know the Gilgo Beach murderer was arrested yesterday. He's an architect in Manhattan. His name is Rex Heuermann. And I found out today because my boyfriend called me and he says Rex Heuermann was arrested. I saw it on the news. And the reason he used his real name rather than his serial killer name, the Gilgo Beach murderer, is because him and I both know Rex Heuermann. I met him through a networking group in Manhattan I'm a part of, or was a part of, because I'm an interior designer that runs my own business. And Rex joined shortly after to network for his architecture company. And of course, us being in the same industry, I networked with him and I got to know him and I had a lot of conversations with him. And I can tell you right now that me and my boyfriend are not surprised that he is a serial killer. Just everything about him, his mannerisms, how full of himself that he was, how odd he was. He was always very sweaty and like not very nice to talk to and creepy. Sorry, he's a fucking serial killer. I'm not gonna say sorry. We're not surprised. We are shocked. I'm still processing all of this. Thinking over and over again about how I shook his hand and how his hand felt, and I'm listening to the voicemails on my phone from him, and I'm going over the emails, and I'm looking at the photos of all of us at the Christmas party and the photos of him at our networking meetings in the conference room, and I'm just seeing this monster hiding in plain sight. And it all makes so much sense. He was so full of himself. I just thought he was an architect that thought he was like God's gift to this world. But no, he's literally a serial killer. And the thing I can't stop thinking about the most is this conversation I had with him. It was just me and him. And it was after one of our meetings that we have once a month in person. We go to a bar after because you're supposed to bond with these people. You're supposed to network with them because they will refer you business. We're talking. We're towards the back of the bar. It's really just all the people from the networking group and then some people that got off of work here and there at tables. And the whole entire time he is just talking about himself and not asking a single question about me, and I'm not surprised. That's okay. It's for business, so I just kind of grin and bear it. And everything he's talking about, I read about in an article today from a YouTube interview he had. It's like he practiced everything to tell anybody about himself ever and just memorized it and tells it to people over and over, because he told me everything that was said in that YouTube interview he told me about the first time he met me, about how he loves making furniture and like uses like a hammer in every project, and like he made it out to seem like he had this like big house with a big workshop, and I saw his house on the news. It was like in shambles, and he's an architect. This house is supposed to be nice-ish, especially when you have an office in Manhattan, It all just seems really off and disturbing. So towards the end of this conversation that's been all about him, I try to redirect it towards finding common interests. So one of the things that I always pull out of my conversation toolbox is, oh, do you listen to podcasts? Who doesn't love a good podcast? Of course he doesn't. And he asks me the first thing about myself, and he asks back, do you like any podcasts? And I say, yeah, I listen to some comedy, history ones, and then I used to listen to a lot of true crime, but it's a little dark for me, so I don't really listen anymore. And he asks me, do you have a favorite case? A favorite true crime case? And I say, no, I don't. I have a podcast I used to listen to, Crime Junkie, and he asks me if I know. I'm not making this up at all. I'm just so shocked. I need to share this with somebody, all of TikTok. He asked me, do I know about the Gilgo beach murders? And of course I do. I'm pretty sure there's a multi-part episode on Crime Junkie. And I'm like, yeah, of course I know. And he goes on to tell me, yeah, that's a serial killer that was never caught in my hometown, my neighborhood where I live. And tells me the guy killed 10 people and he might still be out there. And I make a joke and I'm like, yeah, you never know who you're talking to. Anybody could be I could be a serial killer. And he laughed at that. And I just cannot stop running that conversation over and over in my head, and I'm really disturbed. And I'm going to my parents' house right now because I can't deal with this. I'm disturbed, I'm upset, I'm disappointed, and I just need to get away from, going through my phone and looking at all the interactions I've had with this person, who I honestly was not very close with at all. But he left a huge impression on me of being a very odd, unwelcoming person in a networking group full of very kind and fun and funny people. And he is one of the reasons I left. I mainly left because I was so busy and I bought a house. But once he joined, he was a weirdo, and I didn't want to be around that. I'm really big on, not my monkeys, not my circus, mind my own business kind of deal. So if you have any questions about Rex Heuermann or my interactions with him, feel free to comment. I will probably answer. I'm not super busy on TikTok. So, yeah, stay safe out there and trust your gut. If something feels off about somebody, trust yourself. Don't back out. Just don't try to be like, oh, but it's rude. Just leave the conversation. Who cares? You don't have to tell them they're creepy. Get yourself away from that person. I guess that's the piece of advice I have to give everybody from my experience. So, if you want to see pictures of me with him for proof or a voicemail from him, I will post it if you guys want me to.
Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, and comment for more videos.